How many of you have trouble with hiring? The whole process. Anybody having trouble finding the talent they need, going through the whole process? Well, I can tell you, I want to just fess up here. I want to tell you my old life. I think that there's a little bit of WorldBlu that's kind of a version of True Confessions. As I moved up the managerial chain, moved from manager to director and ultimately to vice president of R&D at the company I worked for, what I realized is I hated everything about the hiring process. I hated the idea of creating requisitions for the positions in HR. I hated writing the ads that went into the papers. I hated the resume collection process, and it just went downhill from there. It was, I refer to a standard interviewing process as two people sitting across the table lying to each other for a couple of hours. Think about it, right? If somebody says, "Are you a team player? Do you like people?" Right? Or they ask, every manager usually develops one kind of what I call a stupid question. For instance, if you were a day of the week, what day would you be? I once caught somebody on that question. They said, Saturday morning. I'm like, really? Saturday morning? That's an interesting choice. Why Saturday morning? Tell me more about what you're thinking. And suddenly you saw this look of terror come across their face, and they're like, because I want to look back over the course of the whole week and think about how much I got done. So eventually you work your way through this torturous process, and then have you ever thought about the best day on a job? Has that ever occurred to you? What's the best day on a job? Any comments from the audience on what they think the best day on a job is? Today, okay, you still got a job, that's good. A lot of people will, without thinking, say, well, the first day. No. Do you remember your first day in a job? You show up at the reception area. This is a true story for me. I get the call, "Hey, Rich, Susan's here for her first day." I'm like, really? Susan? Oh, Susan, today? Oh my gosh. So I race down to the reception area and I greet her. "Susan, we're so glad you're here. So happy to, we're so delighted you're here. I'm not sure what happened in the paperwork process, but Susan, I'm really sorry, but we don't have a cube, a chair, a phone, a computer, but we're so happy you're here," right? And all of a sudden panic is starting to come over her. And I say, "Hey, listen, I'll set you up in the lunchroom. I'll introduce you to a few people along the way." And of course the people I'm introducing her to are like, "Well, who's this? Who did Rich hire now?" Right? And I hope he doesn't ask me to help them along or help her along because I'm so busy with everything else I'm doing. And I set her up in the lunchroom and I say, "Hey, Susan, just stay here. By the way, that project you were so excited about in the interview, it got canceled. But don't worry, there's some more stuff coming. It's just not ready yet. The approvals haven't been. But we're so excited you're here," right? Has anybody ever had a first day like that at a job? I mean, it's amazing how many people say, "Who have you been talking to? You've just described my first day on the job." I will declare to you that for most people, the best day on a new job is actually the day of the interview, because that's when everything seems shiny and new and there's so much excitement about the future. Well, I went through this standard life for too long and ultimately reinvented the organization within which I was placed as a VP, and that reinvention led to Menlo. If you come to Menlo, and many do, we had over 3,000 people a year come to visit now, and they're confronted by something when they come in. They're confronted by one of those vilified open office environments you read about. The ones that Fast Company magazine calls an idea born in the mind of Satan in the deepest caverns of hell. And then people send me these articles and they say, "Rich, why does this work for Menlo? Why doesn't this work anywhere else?" And I say, well, there's probably one fundamental reason it works for us, and it struggles to work other places, is we didn't build an open and collaborative workspace. We built an open and collaborative culture, and we fit our workspace to our culture. Now, culture is an interesting word. It's not the thing, but it's an important part of what you're trying to develop in a company. And a lot of people see our culture and they wonder, where does the teaching begin? How do you teach people the culture? Is it part of your onboarding process? Is it a class they take after they join? Is there some certification process they go through? Because you see, to work in an environment like this, it's different. It can be unnerving, particularly for people who work in my industry. We work in this big open room. The team's in charge of the space. All the tables are pushed together. They sit shoulder to shoulder. They actually work two to a computer. The pairs are assigned and we switch them every 5 working days. This is an unnerving way for people in my industry to work. And so we have to teach them why, and where the teaching begins is in fact with our tours. You see, we begin teaching our culture long before anybody decides to come work for us. These 3,000 people that come through a year, we don't know why they're coming. Some are coming because maybe they're interested in using us as a company and they want to peek inside before they choose us. Some are coming because they've just heard about us and maybe they want to influence their own culture. And then there's a few lurkers who come through saying, I've heard interesting things about this Menlo company, but before I send in a resume, before I apply, before I figure out if this is a place I want to work, I can just come peek inside. I can walk around on the tour. No reason for being there other than just I'm one of the many tour guests that comes through. And the tours are the same regardless of who comes, the mixture of people in the room. And in fact, a lot of people ask us where we find people that work at Menlo. Given we're a software design and development firm, that's what we do for a living, is we build software for others. We have to have some of those rare breed talents of software developers. About half of our team are programmers, and they're hard to find these days. There's many of them, but there's a greater demand than there are people. And people ask me, they say, have you had trouble locating people? And I say, no, we don't. We never take out an ad. We never actually recruit. In fact, our greatest source of references are people who send us their children. People ask me, what do you mean they send you their children? They're imagining little babies or something like that. And I said, no, parents come in to visit. They're on a tour from their company, and then they get done with the tour, and they say, are you hiring? Because my kid would love to work at a place like this. And I sort of liken it to a desperate scene on the deck of the Titanic where the parent is literally handing us their child saying, please take my child. It's too late for me, but I want them to have a good life. And these are pictures of actual Menlonians whose parents first came to visit Menlo and then offered us their children later. In the top page is Megan Graham. On the other picture, it's Anna. And this is a common story at Menlo. In fact, Rob is one of our more fun stories to tell. I know Rob was sent to us by his father because his father told me he was going to send me his son. Well, later Rob came to work for us, and a lot of people question me when I say people regularly offer their children. I say, hey, Rob, come here. I want to explore this with the tour group. And he comes over, and I said, Rob, how did you find out about Menlo? He says, oh, my dad came on a tour. And then he came home that night. I said, Rob, you should go work for this company. I think it'd be really cool. And Rob did. The part of the story he didn't know the first time I asked him this is I said, Rob, did you have a job? He goes, oh, yeah. I was working for my dad's company. His dad was the CEO of a $500 million a year firm. Went home that night and said, quit. Go work for them. You'll enjoy yourself more. It's a powerful kind of recruiting. But in order to figure out who's going to fit our culture and who's going to work well at Menlo, we had to reinvent the interview process. See, I hated the interview process, as I said before. So we destroyed the old one and replaced it with something new. We have an interview process where we don't ask any questions during the entire interview process. It's an experiential interview. In fact, we could conduct this interview with everybody in the room here. This is maybe slightly larger than the typical interview we would do, but we will bring 30 or 40 or 50 people in all at the same time. And we simulate the work environment during our interview process. We pair people together during the interview. 2 candidates competing potentially for the same position. And then we give them the weirdest instructions ever. Your job is to try and get the person sitting next to you a second interview. If they struggle, help them out. We're looking for people with good kindergarten skills. We haven't actually read your resumes yet at this point. We don't care where you've gone to school. We don't care what you've learned. We don't care what you've studied. We don't care what you've done. We care far more about you as a person before we figure out whether you have any of the skills necessary to participate in our team. Most companies give lip service to culture. We put it first. Now, we have you work together for 20 minutes while one of my team members watches you work. And they literally just watch you work together. You share a piece of paper and a pencil. We tell you to be polite to one another. If you want the pencil, ask for it politely. Don't grab it out of the other person's hands. We give them very explicit instructions. We actually want them to succeed. I remember one time one of our engineers asked my co-founder James, they said, "But what if they can fake collaboration?" And he said, "Can they fake it for 40 hours a week? Then we're good with that." We do 3 of these pairings. We switch the pairs every 20 minutes and we send you all home. That was the first interview, no questions asked. You can ask us all the questions you want. But we're giving you a chance to see what it's like to work at Menlo. And then, after you all leave, we bring all of the team members who watched you. If there were 30 of you, there would be 15 of us. And we talk about everything we saw and we vote. And within the next 2 to 3 hours, on those 30 candidates that came through, we make the decision as to who's coming for the second interview. And what I like about this part of our process is 2 things. One, it's fast. I think what defeats most interviewing and hiring processes is how slow the process is. By the time you make the decisions, the candidate you really want to hire has already found a job somewhere else. Here, we're making these decisions on second interview within the first 2 hours after you've been there, literally the same evening that you come in. The interview runs from 4 to 6, and by 9 o'clock that night, we've made decisions and are starting to issue calls for a second interview. The team votes on this. I have no say. As a co-founder, CEO of the company, I have no say in who gets to join the company. They tell me I get a vote. I swear I've watched them crumple it up and just throw it away. Because they look at me and say, "Rich, you don't have to work side by side with these folks. This is our team. We need to build our team." So the team votes, and the only thing they're voting on is, do you come in for a second interview? And on the second interview, you actually come by yourself for a day and pair in and do real work, and we pay you a 1-day contract so you can begin to experience what does it really feel like to work at Menlo. If you're a programmer, you'll do coding. If you're a high-tech anthropologist, you'll do designing. If you're a project manager, you'll do customer contact sorts of activities. And so everybody on the team who's joining gets a chance to see what it feels like. And if that works, we invite you in for a 3-week trial. So we make it all experiential. Again, you can ask all the questions you want during the process, but we're simply observing how you work. In each stage of the way, the team is the one making the decisions. The team builds the team. We are one of those weird non-hierarchical offices. We have no bosses at Menlo. There are no reporting relationships. We didn't know there were terms for this. We just didn't want that stuff. And this onboarding process allows the people who are joining to see what it feels like to actually work. When you come in the door on the very first day, that second interview, and you're going to do real work, within minutes, you're sitting down at a computer or at a design table or with project management artifacts, working side by side with someone who cares about your progress, cares about your evaluation, and is guiding you through. Often the keyboard is moving over in front of your hands within minutes of walking in the door. And you might say, "Boy, I don't know what to do." And your team member will say, "That's okay. I'll tell you what to do. Let's write an automated unit test." "Oh, I've never done one of those before." "That's okay. I'll tell you how we do it." And so the teaching and mentoring is happening right there. And of course, we're giving you a chance to learn more of our culture during this onboarding process. And then everybody wonders, oh, this sounds so democratic and non-hierarchical. Maybe everybody makes the same amount of money, and that's not true. We have 15 different pay grades at Menlo, but we're public about them. If you're an associate level 3, everybody knows it and everybody knows how much you make. Because an associate level 3, you're making exactly the same amount of money across the organization as every other associate 3. There's no clever negotiations, salary negotiations at hiring. There's no needling around this at a review time or anything like that. The only way you move up at Menlo is to move up from associate level 3 to consultant 1, or from consultant 1 to consultant 2, or from consultant 3 to senior 1. The only way to make more money is to move up through those levels. And the levels are published. They're out there for everyone to see, so everybody knows what they're making. You can't imagine how much angst this removes from the organization by having everyone aware what everybody else in the team is making. Because humans are so weird about this stuff. And then the way you move up is through peer evaluation. Since there are no bosses in the office, the peers have to evaluate you. We actually do it in a feedback lunch in an open setting in the middle of the room. And you gather people together over lunch, and you talk about how you're doing. You talk about what your hopes and dreams are. You talk about how you think things are going, and then you start to hear this from your peers. And this can happen as often as you like. We have no annual performance review system. Deming told us that was probably one of the most egregious tools American management ever conceived, because it pits one team member against another, right? Most organizations have this weird system where you have to have a bell curve distribution where, doesn't meets, exceeds expectations, all that kind of stuff. And of course, the difference in compensation is usually measured in hundredths of a percentage point between those 3 points. But at Menlo, the team gets together, the team discusses, and the team decides whether you're ready to move up. And if you're not ready to move up, they coach you on what it's going to take to get there. And ultimately, sometimes the decision has to be, it's time to go. And the team makes that decision too. And it's never easy, and it shouldn't be. And I reassure the team every time they go through this painful process, number one, you must do this with dignity and respect. You must honor the individual, and you have to understand that after the decision is made, we all should figure out what's the best thing we can do to help them transition to the next part of their lives. One of the reasons I have this book here, I don't know if any of you have seen this one. This is probably one of the most powerful books I've read in recent years, called Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. And it talks about how we need to develop a core inner being to look at other people as people and not as objects. And it's so easy to do this when you've made a decision to fire someone, or someone has made a decision to leave. You've all been there probably, like I have at one time in a career or another. I remember one of our team members had worked for us, had decided to leave and go on to a big automotive company because she wanted big company experience on her resume. And she came to me almost in tears to give me this news. And I said, Carissa, why are you crying? She says, well, I didn't want to tell you. I don't want to hurt you guys. I really like it, but I want to go get some big company resume experience. And I said, Carissa, you're managing your career. That's the right thing to do. She goes, well, I don't know if it'll work. Can I come back? I said, Carissa, you know how this works. You can always come back. Because that's the way we are. We open our doors in both directions. We actually had a party for her when she left. She went to work for the big automotive, and she said it was only a 9-month contract, and she didn't know if it'd get renewed. And I said, well, let's put a date on the calendar, and let's talk and see if it's going to get reviewed. If not, we'll see if we can get you back on our schedule the following week. She felt so relieved. Now, she was going to be gone for 9 months. She called me after 4 and said, Rich, they're not human here. Can I come back early? And we said, sure, come on back. So she delivered the news to her boss at that big automotive company. Can you imagine what they did? The security guards met her at her desk with cardboard boxes. They stripped her of her pass. They watched her pack her personal belongings. They marched her out to the front door. She didn't get to say goodbye to any of her peers, and they made it very clear to her she is never to ever apply for work here again. I don't know why we treat each other as humans that way. We don't allow them to take control of their own lives. I think the most important thing we can do in these conversations is understand there's a human being sitting across the table from us. I typically open up my personal network to anybody we let go to tell them, look, anything you need, any person I can put you in contact with, please let me know. Now, I once got a call from Bart on our team who had been let go by us just a couple of weeks before, and I can tell you there were tears in that conversation when we let him go. And he called me up, he says, Rich, I just want to talk. And I thought, oh boy, how's this going to go? Just let him go, and he's calling the CEO. And he says, I just want to let you know I got a new job down in Detroit. And I said, oh, Bart, that's awesome. It's so good to hear from you. Thank you. That's such a relief to hear you landed well. He goes, no, that's not why I'm calling. He says, I think we have a software project for your company. I want to bring my CEO down to Menlo and introduce him to the company. And I thought, wow, we must have handled that exit pretty well. So I just want to finish out with a picture of what happens when you create this different kind of culture. And it'll give you a sense of what's happened when we've implemented all of these freedom-centered design principles into our organization. Most organizations don't really spend much time thinking about their culture. Most organizations operate in chaos. Everyone wants to work on something that's bigger than themselves. I did. I started out in an industry that I was very excited about. Very quickly, I hit a trough of disillusionment. And by 1997, when I was promoted to vice president of product development, I wanted out. I wanted to get as far away from this industry as I could. And then in that moment, I decided to change the industry. And that's the story that I've captured in this book. People are coming from all over the planet to come visit this space that's in the basement of a parking structure in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. And they're coming for a reason. They're coming to see something. What most people are looking for is some lessons around what it takes to build an intentionally joyful culture. Imagine half of my team had joy and the other half didn't. Which half would you want working on your project? We had so many requests for these tours, we realized it was time to share this story with the world in a different way. And that's how the book came to be. The space is flexible. We work 2 to a computer. We assign these pairs. We switch them every 5 working days. The human energy that results from this kind of organization, you can actually feel the joy when you're in the room. My name is Richard Sheridan, and I'm the author of Joy, Inc. This was a personally selfish journey for me. I was very excited about this industry in the earliest days of my young life, and then my industry betrayed me, and I was frightened. I was scared. I didn't know what I was going to do the rest of my career. And ultimately, I built the organization that I want to go visit every day, that I want to be a part of. And I'm just glad to see that there's a bunch of people that want to be there with me that help me pull this off. And I can tell you that Tracy and her team have been such great friends throughout this whole process, such good cheerleaders for what it is we're doing. And so many of you in the room have either come to visit or know us and have gotten to know us, are such great supporters of what we're trying to accomplish. You guys are trying to change the world, and I just want to encourage you on that path. Thank you very much.